Hey everybody, welcome to Disney Movie Stack. I'm your host, Ray Goots, and thank you so much for tuning in to our first episode. Now, a little bit of background on this show. My mom loved Disney, and I lived with my mom for many, many years, in fact, my entire life until she passed away in 2015. And I kept her Disney film collection. She would always buy them. So, if they came out on DVD, she'd buy the DVD version. If they came out on Blu-ray, she'd buy the Blu-ray version. So we're constantly upgrading the collection. I'm sitting there one day, and I realized that was only 10 or 12 films away from... Because I still... She died in 2015, but I kept buying the movies. I would buy, Zootopia, and I would buy Mona, and I wouldn't watch them, but I just was like, I have to keep going with this collection. So I'm sitting there one day, and I was like, I'm only 10 away from having the whole collection. So I went to Amazon and ordered those last 10 movies, and then I had all 58 of the original animated classics made by Walt Disney Animated Studios. Now, when I say the original, the 58, I'm not talking about the Goofy movie or DuckTales the movie or the Tigger movie. Those were made by they're not like the real. This is like Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and some stinkers that a lot of people know about. So I said, you know what? I think I'm going to watch all 58 of these because there's a lot of them, like Pocahontas, I think has been in my film collection now for almost 25 years next year, and I've seen maybe 3 minutes of it, and there's a couple other movies like that. I was like, I'm going to start watching all of them. So I start watching them, and I start coming up with jokes for my act. I don't know if I'm a stand-up comedian. That's my full-time job. And I thought to myself, well, I should do a special. I should do an hour-long special where I talk about Disney films. And I got 5 jokes in, and then I hit Saludos Amigos, and I couldn't think of anything about that with that movie that an audience would relate to, like on Netflix. Like you turn on Netflix, and I get to Saludos Amigos, and you're on the floor laughing. I couldn't think of a single. I watched the movie with 2 comedians, but while we're watching Saludos Amigos with my friend Christina Galston, she was saying a lot of funny shit about this. She was making fun of the movie. And I thought to myself, you know what? Instead of doing a special, why don't I do a podcast where me and a comedian sit down, a fellow comic, and we watch one of these movies, and then we discuss it. And that's exactly what I'm doing now because, there's so much to talk about with 95% of these movies. Every movie kind of represents a step forward in animation or movie making or technology. And most podcasts, I feel, when it regards Disney, they're not. Give you. This is not a family-friendly podcast. This is going to be a dirty podcast. The comedians are allowed to curse, or they want to get dark or sexual with their thoughts. They can, but there's really nothing edgy, like a real discussion about these movies. And I figured, well, why don't I do it? So we're gonna cover in chronological order. This is season 1. Now, after we get past we're going to go from Snow White, which is today's episode, and we're going to end with Frozen 2. Now, after Frozen 2, depending on the feedback I get, I may switch genres for season 2. But as of right now, we've got well over a year of content to go through, and we shouldn't waste any more time. So let's get to the first episode. Barry Ribbs was my guest. Now, a little background on Barry Ribbs. Barry Ribbs is an old white man who does the urban circuit, which are the black rooms. And a lot of his act is he'll be the token white guy, but he looks like Christopher Lloyd. And that's when I first met him. I was the manager of Caroline's for many years, and they would bring in this old man in a red shirt, and it was Barry Ribbs. And so there'd be acts like Capone and Talent and Ed Lover. These are all well-established names in the stand-up community, but more on the urban side. And then Barry Ribbs would go up, and he would be like, yo! And the crowd would be on the floor. So the reason why I picked Barry Ribbs is he's been around comedy for a really long time, and he's literally the oldest comedian I know that I had access to. So I figured to myself, if anybody has seen the effect that Disney and Snow White has had on the world since its debut in the 30s, this is the man. But we actually had a very interesting conversation. Now, just a little background. I'm picking comedians for every episode based on, like, what if I think they match the movie, or if there's something in the movie that they can relate to, or if there's something in the movie that they can pull from. There's some movies where this is going to be tough, like Fun and Fancy Free. Again, the first 5 episodes, by the way, are already recorded. This weekend, I'm entering the Dark Zone, which are the 6 movies that were made around World War II. Between Bambi and Cinderella, there's 6 really strange movies that nobody really knows about, and that's going to be tough picking comedians that are right for them. But I've picked most of the comedians for those movies, so that should be interesting in and of itself. But every comedian I pick, I think they can bring a interesting perspective on the movie, because I feel like there's something in the movie that they can relate to, or there's something in the movie that applies to their ethnicity or their background. And for Barry Ribs, I picked him because he's the oldest comedian I know, and Snow White is the first animated film, so I thought he might have a real perspective on the history of animation, the history of film, and the history of comedy. And he did, but not the one that you expect. So sit back, relax, and we're going to I take commercial breaks on my podcast. You'll hear the commercial in a second. But sit back, relax, get a little drink while the commercial plays, and we're going to come back with me and Barry Ribs discussing Snow White. Thank you.
Hey, do your parents need help? Like, if your father gets his thumb stuck in the coin changer when he's giving you your allowance, does he seem depressed? And when you ignore your mother's plea to take a chicken sandwich along to the discotheque, does she look despondent? If so, tell them to stop worrying. Help is on the way.
Won't you please help me?
Now, we're sure you know all about Help, the new Beatles movie, but your parents may not. It took some of them months to get down to see the Beatles in a hard day's night, though they laughed just as loud as you did once they were there, and they really flipped with a great Beatles sound. So you better tell your parents that Help, the new Beatles movie, a United Artists release, has spine-tickling adventure, side-tingling laughter, and lots of lively music. And be sure to tell them that it's in color, too. Be the first in your neighborhood to give his parent a hand. They need help.
Help me.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Welcome back. This is the first episode. Welcome to the first episode of Movie Stack Disney Edition. I'm your host, Ray Goots, and I'm here with Barry Ribs. Barry, what's up?
What up, people? This is going to be huge.
This is the start of a new era, and we're here today to talk about Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, which came out December 21st, 1937. It was made for a budget of $1.49 million. Barry Ribs, guess how much money it grossed?
Did you say the budget was $1 million plus?
Yeah, 1.49.
That's an incredible amount of money in 39?
1939. Oh, no, 1937, actually.
That's a lot of money 80 some odd years ago.
For a cartoon.
And what its gross is now?
What it grossed back then.
What
ready
it
for
grossed
this?
What it grossed at that time?
Yeah.
Let's say 12 million.
418 million.
How much?
418 million.
At that time,
yes.
Or present?
I think at that time. If you if you adjust for inflation, I mean it probably beats Avengers and all that other shit. Yeah.
Over 400 million.
Yes.
And that was
and they only made it for $1.5 million.
And for what period of time was that? In the first year of release, or you don't have that info?
I don't have that info. Let's take a quick look at that info. Let me take a quick look at that. Well, you know what? We'll get to that in a second.
Yo, the Goots, thank you for having me to watch that Snow White thing, because in all my years, I never saw Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Never.
I can't believe it. So let me get started. Barry Ribs, where were you born?
I was born in Crown Heights, Brooklyn.
Oh, wow. Oh, my God. And when did you decide to start doing stand-up?
Formally or informally?
You can start at the very beginning of your stand-up journey.
I started February of 1994. I have to say 19 because a lot of the young motherfuckers. Can I curse at all?
Yeah. I don't think Disney's going to sponsor this. We can curse. We can say what we want.
I like to say 1994 so the young motherfuckers don't say, you mean 1894? So I hit the stage February of 1994 And I had an opportunity to start my career literally 19 years earlier, but I did not have that flame inside of me, that wanting to do it. So, and matter of fact, in February '94, I did it as sort of a second choice because nobody would give me a job behind the scenes, because I always knew since the '70s that I had a gift an eye for talent. So that's where I felt more comfortable in the '70s, where I landed a couple of jobs behind the scenes. And I didn't want to hit the stage in the '70s because the likes of Jay Leno, Gary Shandling, Paul Mooney, Howie Mandel, Robin Williams, I was intimidated by that greatness. So I started basically in '94 because I had no choice in a way, but deep down inside, I was born to be a stand-up.
Yeah, and that's kind of the reason why I picked you, because for the first episode, this is literally the first animated movie, and you're one of the only comics I know that was around the '70s and '80s. I mean, and so I figured, like, all right, we're gonna do a comedian talking about a Disney movie. What better comedian for the first episode of this podcast than someone who's been around since the beginning of modern stand-up? And what this movie that we just watched really represents the beginning of the animated film. And like without this movie, there is no animated films. There's no animation industry or anything like that, you know. And this movie really kicked it off. So that's why I had you on this episode.
That from your knowledge, that literally was the first one or the first commercial success.
This is the first animated movie ever. Before this movie, there were only like short films, like, you know, like the Bugs Bunny cartoons you've seen and the Betty Boop cartoons.
So in other words, preceding this, it was cartoons, but this was a feature film animated.
Yes.
And I think you would agree, they did a wonderful job.
Oh yeah, they definitely did. I would consider this just based off what happens because of this movie, because this movie also started. This is the reason why Disney now owns half the world. Is it starts with this movie and its success. Because if this movie had bombed, he probably would have been out of business, and everyone thought it was going to bomb because people were like, no one's going to watch a cartoon for 90 minutes, and obviously everybody did. But
Gotcha.
Before we get more into Snow White, I just want to ask you, tell me a little bit about your childhood, man. What was your childhood like as a kid? What did you like doing?
A lot of your listeners probably are very unaware of that we used to have back in the day a lot of street games. A lot of street games, such as spinning tops, skelly with soda caps off the bottle,
Okay.
punch ball. I was born and raised in Crown Heights. I was a fat kid. I was and still am a loner. It was me, my sister, and my parents. We lived in Crown Heights a couple of times. From my recollection, it was a wonderful childhood, but once I got into my teens and a bad skin complexion, the insecurities kicked in like a mother. I feel for the kids today who have really bad cases of fucking acne and shit. It was really debilitating, whatever. As far as the student goes, I wasn't too fond of school. I remember in sixth grade, always getting out of my seat and walking around the classroom. I was kind of incorrigible. I also was a smart kid, but I never was like a student nerd. I was just happy getting my C's to pass. Unfortunately, I took that mentality into my entertainment career, just trying to get by. Thankfully, I reprogrammed my mind, and now I try to do A work as opposed to C level work. That's why my career has been climbing for the last 10, 15 years.
And that's why you're a legend.
Somebody was talking yesterday. I was on another podcast. She believes, shout out to Christy Miller and her partner JC Best on their podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Christy specifically feels a legend in comedy is someone who is truly original, a la Richard Pryor, Lenny Bruce. So I will never be legend in that way. But if you want to call me legend for the mere fact that I'm doing comedy 25 and a half years, and I am one of the oldest unknowns in America, I'll take the legend mantle for that. But I will not take it for breaking new ground, because nobody coming into stand-up will ever break new ground.
No, not at this point. Not at this point. So let me ask you a question. When you were a kid, did your parents take you to see any Disney films?
As I kind of hinted to you before we went on,
Well, they weren't here, so you have to explain. Yeah.
I come from a very dysfunctional family where my mother had her own life. My father had his own, he being a narcissist. I have a sister. Haven't been in touch with her in a long time. My father was busy working practically 7 days a week at one point, having a grocery store. So my late Uncle Paul was like a little bit of a substitute father, if you will, taking me to my first basketball game, teaching me a little bit about sports because my father was not into sports. As far as going to movies, yes. My father loved entertainment. My father would take me to the movies. I vaguely remember. I also remember my mother on one occasion, maybe two occasions, taking me to the movies. Back in the day, there was no movie complex. There was basically one theater. Summertime was wonderful to go to the movies because the air condition would be blasting. And if you wanted to get out of the muggy summer heat like we're having now, you went to the freaking movies. And your listeners who probably heard of the Three Stooges, Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello, Bozo the Clown, they would appear at the movie theaters live on stage, man, before the movies even were shown. So I grew up in a different era when going to the movies was the place to go. As you know now, people having their DVDs, etc., Netflix, blah, 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 I think, and you know better because you are a year younger than me, the Goots.
Well, I'm more than a year younger than you.
2 years.
Going. Okay.
I got a feeling people going out to the movies has taken a big freaking hit with the box office receipts. I think it may be a dying industry.
Well, unless you make a superhero movie or an animated film, most people don't go to the theaters anymore. Yeah, they're not gonna go see some movie about a single mom trying to make ends meet. No one's gonna go see that anymore. They're gonna watch that on Amazon or Netflix. I agree with you on that.
There you go.
So when you were young ribs, before no one in your family took you to see Disney films. The reason why I'm asking this is because I feel like a lot of the comedians that are gonna do this podcast probably have Disney a lot in their childhood, and I'm just clarifying that you really didn't have any Disney in your childhood. It wasn't.
Well, you're now bringing back memories.
Okay.
Disney, I believe, produced a film called The Parent Trap.
Yes. Live action.
Haley Mills, she played dual roles. She played twins.
Mm-hmm.
You just conjured up, if that's the word, you brought back my memory of a Disney production. I saw that in the theater. It's actually, as a kid, I loved it. Sometimes it doesn't hold up as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
As far as other Disney animated stuff, it's not ringing a bell if I went to the theater and seen any more. But I definitely did see The Parent Trap, which was, at the time for a young kid, a wonderful movie.
Yeah, that was a lot of people that are around your age say that movie's one of their favorites of their childhood. Now,
Wow.
you have a son, right, Mr. Ribs?
My son Jason is a little over 30 years old.
Okay. Now, when he was a kid, did you take him to see any Disney films? Or did he have a lot of Disney in his life, or he didn't care about that stuff?
That's a good question, and I got to be honest with you.
Okay.
My memory way back is incredibly etched in my mind. As far as my son taking him to the movies, I really don't recall if, in fact, I took him to any freaking movie.
Oh, wow. Okay.
My memory, certain periods of my life, is really fucked up.
Okay. Okay. All right. So you probably didn't take him to see any of the Disney films.
Yeah, or any movie for that matter, I believe.
Okay. So you don't even know if he likes Disney.
If he,
Yeah.
let me tell you something. If you ask my son, if he was here, and my son is going through his own personal whatever, so, but if you ask my son, growing up, what he liked in entertainment, it was basically the rappers such as Eminem and 50 Cent and Drake.
Okay.
As far as movies,
Or cartoons.
I really don't know because once he became a teenager, he flew the nest and hung out with his friends, and mommy and daddy were persona non grata.
Okay, cool. So the reason I'm doing all this background with you, Mr. Ribs, is because, I really feel like a lot of people grew up with this stuff. They grew up with the Snow White movies and the other movies we're going to talk about in the next couple of weeks, which is Pinocchio or Bambi. But you come from this interesting position because you did not grow up with Snow White. You've never seen Snow White before in your life, as you mentioned at the start of the podcast, correct?
That is correct. And let me tell you something. You and I were conversing on my loving to talk about the business. It's actually a wonderful film. A lot of times, as you may or may not agree, there are people that maybe in adulthood, they do not feel animated film is their first choice. It's all subjective taste. Just like in stand-up, it's subjective who's funny, who's not. Some people's taste for film runs the gamut. Some people, I'm not watching no animated shit. But for anybody that's in that situation, having watched this, it's beautifully done. It is truly a classic.
Yeah, that's true. And, I agree with you. Like, I'm 38 now, and there's some stuff, some cartoons on TV that kids like and stuff. I'll put it on, and I want to blow my brains out. But I think whether you're 38 or you're 8 or you're 88, I think you can recognize how impressive this film is. Because not only, as you said, is it beautifully drawn and it's beautifully made, but it's the first one. Nobody ever did that before.
And think about this. When we watch old Charlie Chaplin stuff, Chaplin.
Yeah, you call him Chapman.
I said Chapman?
Yeah.
Probably because I'm a hood comic, right?
There you go. I think there's a Chapman somewhere, yeah. Charlie Chapman playing the Apollo. Okay.
When you go to the Olive restaurant above the Comedy Cellar, they're continually showing you Charlie Chaplin, Chaplin stuff. And I watched some of it, but it's sort of like just atmosphere shit. Now, as you know, because I know you know some history, the first motion pictures, we forget what year. I know you're a historian. That stuff, think about this. That original stuff looks like just
the 30s films.
Is that when
like you talking about the black and white film?
Is that when motion? That's the word.
Yeah.
Motion picture started in the 30s. Is that
Well, it
right?
started more like the 19 like early 1919, 1920, around that time.
Yeah. So you look at that stuff. Yo, it's a good start. But think about this. 1937 or whatever on the Snow White, Seven Dwarfs, for a first, they came out of the gate
Swinging.
with the level quite freaking high as opposed to the first motion pictures. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And think about this. The first Mickey Mouse cartoon, Steamboat Willie. Did you ever see that one, or have you ever heard of it?
I seen bits of it.
Bits of it, because they show it. That was very crude, black and white. That's in 1927. And then in 10 years later, it goes from black and white stick figures to this shit. Like, that's impressive. That's really impressive.
Because obviously, and I am not knowledgeable on Walt Disney, but you got to figure on the surface, the man, genius. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit.
No, you're not.
And he obviously hired geniuses. He was like Steve Jobs and what's the other dude, the Windows, Bill Gates.
Bill Gates.
He was the original Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, so to speak.
Because he had a if you think about it, back in the 30s, he had some crazy ideas. He wanted to do a giant theme park. He wanted to make a first animated feature film. Nobody thought this was a good idea. In fact, most people in the Hollywood industry, when the film was being made, referred to the movie as Disney's folly. He had to mortgage his house just to make this movie, just to make the movie. And his wife and his brother were both like, "You're a fucking idiot. Why are you making this movie?"
Yo, Ray, I'm going to keep it 100 here for the listeners and you. Here's my issue with the Disney estate, corporation, brand, whatever. As everybody and their mother knows, when they go to Disneyland, domestically or internationally, they are really sending a real messed up message to family and kids that if you want to come here, you are getting raped financially. And they epitomize with their pricing, and probably the Disney family, they probably sold their stake or whatever. Who knows? I don't like to talk about that, which I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
I don't know how much I know his daughter died, but I think he has some grandkids and stuff.
But I think it's absolutely insane that there's a lot of families out there, and it's supposed to be a family destination. There are a lot of families out there that literally cannot afford to take their family to fucking Disneyland. So in a way, it is the biggest hypocrites on the face of the planet when you are making family-friendly product, but yet people cannot afford to take their children. It's just like the modern-day baseball park. This is a real bone I pick with Disney and the corporate mafia today.
I mean, I couldn't afford to go to. We never went to Disney World or Disneyland when I was a kid, and I wanted to go, but it was just too expensive.
Yo, come on. Yo, if the Disney people are listening in or somebody connected them,
They'll probably eventually listen in. When they
kiss
keep
my
going.
black ass, yo.
Yeah, Disney, fuck you. But just think about it. If this movie flops, if this movie came out and flopped, there would be no Disney World. There'd be no Disneyland. There'd be no ESPN. There'd be no anything if this movie flopped. Isn't that crazy to think of?
Yo, obviously that money for that budget was investors or whatever. Somebody'd be knocking on Walt's door.
Well, I think Walt had to invest most of the money in it, yeah.
Oh, he?
Yeah, he had to mortgage his house just to get the movie finished.
Is he still frozen?
I think so. That's the rumor. And as we get closer, actually, as I get closer to his death, I'm going to do an episode about that. But
yeah, could you imagine him coming back like when they find a cure and shit for whatever, and he's 300 years old?
Well, the craziest part is he died. I was going to get into this because he died during the Jungle Book. I was going to talk about it then, but we'll talk about it now real quick. He died. He's literally, they had the funeral the next day, and they bury him the next day. Like, they bury him, like, within 2 days. Like, most of his staff didn't know the guy was dead. Which leads me to believe they shoved him in an ice chamber or something. Yeah, cryogenics.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what that was his wish.
He's gonna come back as a robot probably. See, my thing, he's already old, so like, if you freeze him, he was, I think he was like 68 or some shit. I gotta look it up, but if you freeze him and he comes back, he's still 68, 70. How many more years does he really have? So they got to put him in a robot body or something. That's what I think.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's what they're working on probably in Disney World. We don't even know about it. There's a lot of weird stuff about Disney World, but we're not there yet. We're only in the 30s. He just made Snow White, everything. But you know what the great thing about this is, Barry, is that like everything starts out as pure. Like this guy said, I want to make a cartoon movie, right? And it's with all these little animals and all these dwarves. But you start off as a pure idea.
You can't say dwarf anymore, Gooch.
We can say it in the 30s. We're in the 30s right now, as you may know, okay? And he starts off as this really
little dwarfs.
They were very little dwarves.
Gotta say
Who
little
was your favorite dwarf in the movie?
Yo, I like the snow bitch. I didn't
Oh,
look
you like
at.
the snow
Yeah,
bitch?
I like the
Did
bitches.
you think she was hot?
Yes.
What did you say when the huntsman? You said had a funny line. The huntsman's about to kill Snow White. What was your line? You said.
I forget, man. I don't repeat
You
jokes
said, why
and
is
shit.
everybody trying to kill this hot bitch or something like that? It was funny. Well, the way you said, but you said it in the Barry Rib style.
Yeah.
But what my whole point is, this was like an artist taking a risk. Like, I'm gonna put it out there. I'm an artist. I have this company. I'm taking a risk.
Did he draw a lot of? He drew a lot of
No,
that stuff.
he had animators, but he would tell. He started off drawing. It was just him and this one guy who kind of fucked over. But he had a lot of artists with. There was by the time they made this movie, there were a ton of people working at the studio. So.
And which I talked about earlier as it started, the credits for all those people attached, they must have had 50 to 100 people that worked on this.
There were certain animators assigned to certain characters, and eventually, and this kind of became the template of how they made these movies. You asked me who played Snow White. Adriana Castelletti.
And she did the dialogue and the singing also,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Say the name again in case the family is listening.
Adriana Castelletti.
Must be Italian, right?
Yeah, she died in 1997 at the age of 80. So, and her ashes were scattered. There's no grave, so sorry about that.
She lived 80. And 87 she passed?
97.
That's a good run.
That's a good
If you
run.
can get 80, 90, or 100,
And she's actually pretty hot, Barry. I think you'd go for her. Want to see what she looks like? There you go, right there.
that was her at the time that she was
Snow White, yeah.
she was singing and stuff?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Would you have smashed it?
Yo, I'd smash anything then or now.
Well, she's ashes in North California. You're gonna go dig up the ashes.
That'd be some kinky shit,
That'd be
man.
some weird. We'd have to talk.
Coming on ashes?
Coming on Snow White's ashes.
Yo,
Christ.
that'd be fucking oatmeal.
Yeah, but like I said, this was a noble idea, and it led to this giant corporation. This one movie led to a giant. I mean, he had to make other things, right? But this was the first big kickoff where like this guy knows what the fuck he's doing. This guy's a genius.
What's the latest Disney smash? Fast forward. What's the?
They just remade The Lion King, but the next animated movie is Frozen 2.
Gotcha.
Have you seen Frozen 1?
Yo, I have seen nothing.
Okay.
Nothing.
So let me ask you a question.
Please.
Because I think you're a very unique guest, especially when to kick off this Disney podcast. What do you have a favorite animated movie, or you've never even seen an animated movie before this?
You know something?
What's that? You be honest.
As I intimated, and I think what we got to learn here for people listening in, and I think I'm going to practice what I preach. There was a resistance to animated feature film.
That's true.
So
You grew up in a different era where if you didn't really have any friends that watched cartoons when you were in your 30s, right? You couldn't go up to right. There were no friends of yours that like sat around and talked about.
I had no friends then and now.
But men in their 30s, when you were in your 30s, did not talk about cartoons, correct?
I was married in my 30s,
I know. I get, it's so funny because nowadays people stay young. Like I still have friends arguing about Transformers. I still have people that like watch Ninja Turtles, and I watch it too. But it's crazy to me to see how like people don't give up on their childhood shit anymore. Whereas you, like, what was your favorite thing when you were a kid? Like, was there a favorite book or was there anything favorite in your childhood besides Parent Trap?
Yo, as I mentioned before, Street Game, Skelly,
Okay.
Punchball.
But you weren't still playing Skelly in your 30s.
Skelly I love Skelly, but
Skelly fell off.
in my 30s, I think I was really into fucking my wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's guys that fuck their wives, but they're still, like, sitting there, you know,
I
talking
think
about
you make-
Ninja Turtles.
I think you make a very valid point, which I've been thinking about
People
today.
don't let go of their childhoods anymore, and I'm not one. And I'm one to talk, but I know so many friends of mine who have wife and kids who have the same amount of shit on their shelves that I do.
You make a point here which you may or may not have thought about, because the thing about the Goots,
Yes.
you're at a perfect age where you said like 38, right?
I'm 38 right now. Yep.
So it's not that difficult for you to remember, say, 20, 25 years ago, okay?
No, I can remember that
It's
easily.
sort of around the corner. But you make a point that I recently, today or yesterday, was thinking about, and that is that dudes, and in maybe some cases women historically have always matured faster than dudes, okay?
Yes.
But you made a point here. I think dudes are not maturing like they did in my father's or grandfather's era, and that's why relationships and marriages are failing and or not even coming together. I'm glad you made that point, and I see the reasoning now. Dudes are not maturing into traditional responsible roles, the Goots, okay? Yeah. And that is why a lot of women are frustrated that they can't really meet, quote unquote, real men.
Yeah.
Yo, we just came up with something together. Okay.
Well, we did know because, you know, you're older, and I forget that in your generation, at a certain point, you ain't gonna go see cartoons. Like that's not part of your day. That's not part of your itinerary. Whereas now, I feel like even people without kids, like I went to go see Toy Story 4. My friend's 30. I'm 38. We went alone to go see Toy Story 4. 30 years ago, we told other dude friends we're gonna go see Toy Story 4. They would be like, "What are you, a bunch of retards? Like, why the fuck are you two going alone to see Toy Story 4?" But now it's just common. People just do shit like that.
What I like
because people, and I'm one of them. I'm not talking. People cannot let go of their childhoods.
Yo, what I like about the Goots is you're you're very passionate about your hobbies, etc., and you live your life the way you want. You are the Goots, a honest, sometimes brutally honest in your own Goots way, and you are a good human being. And fuck most humans because they wish they had the freedom that you have in your life. There's a lot of, you know, the thing about the grass is greener thing. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people that look at you and I, and I'm divorced, and I basically just take care of myself, essentially just like you. There's a lot of people listening. I don't know what your demographic is going to be.
We don't know yet either. We don't know yet. We will find out.
Obviously, your age and my age, we're going to have, if this gets any kind of buzz, we're going to get the gamut of people 25 to death, okay? Mm-hmm. So here's the thing. There's a lot of people listening in that are in absolutely miserable marriages and or relationships, and they envy you and I. So what people say in their hating mode is that we need to take it with a grain of salt. And as I told you today, whether off the mic or whatever, I'm at a point now. I don't give a fuck about what anybody says. I assure you, there are people out there that are going, look at this dude. He only gets these bookings because blah, blah, blah. Fuck that. I used to, in my younger days,
Yes, as you may know.
and the people listening in, and I could teach a lot of shit, but people got to live their lives and they got to get their bumps and bruises. The worst thing you could do is care what other people think. Yo, I wish when I started my career, February 94, I regret that I did not keep a diary of thoughts and actions and bookings, and so I did not keep a diary of what was the Barry of 94 thinking. But I have a good memory somewhat that my entire life, being a loner, being bullied, giving a fuck what people think, feeling like a victim. I am so, in 2019, I am so more comfortable in my professional and personal skin, and any young motherfucker that doesn't pick up on these pearls of wisdom of living a life, and if it doesn't help them, they just don't want to be fucking helped, okay? Where was I going with this?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Is this? Are you plotting a sequel to Snow White right now? You might be very rich.
Snow White porno style, man.
He's
Fuck that bitch.
Let me ask you. We're gonna wrap this up. Let me ask you a quick question. What was your favorite scene in Snow White?
You know what comes to mind?
What's that?
I thought it was one of the best scenes, considering that we were BSing most of the time out of my instigation.
Mm-hmm.
When that dude almost came to taking her heart,
That was intense.
yo, for the Disney brand, and I guess the Disney brand is all about fantasy and beauty and love, and you know better than me.
Whimsy, yeah.
You know better than me what their message was or still is. Who knows? But yo, that scene came out of right field, man. Yo, and early on, yo, that's the amazing thing. You would think that would be actually, that's usually a scene like that. It's towards the last quarter of the film when everything is kind of coming together. Yo, right from the jump, the her aunt or whatever, a stepmother, whatever,
stepmom, yeah.
whatever, step bitch, to actually hire a contract dude. No gun in those days because they had no guns, so they used the
Germany
fucking.
in like the 50s.
They used the
1700s.
fucking knife and shit. And the dude, man, was going to actually rip out her heart, and she was a beautiful bitch, that Snow. I call her Snowy, my bitch. So that scene comes to mind. And does that answer the question?
That does. That's
Yeah.
a great answer. And you're right. Well, he didn't know what his. I think he kind of knew, but he didn't really know what his brand was going to be, which is why I think a lot of these early films shit gets dark because also
They didn't have their voice
they
as
didn't have their
stand-ups.
voice yet. But
Yo.
they got it as the film went on. When the animals show up and the dwarves are singing, you're like, all right, this is what it's going to be down the road 60 years from now. But at that point, he's like, yeah, let's rip her heart out, you know?
You know something about you, the Goots?
What's that?
Just on this podcast, this is a great lane for you. Is like we know a dude that comments on comics and what they do.
Yeah.
You could be, because there's no more Siskel and Ebert. Yo, Goots, this could be your lane.
Well,
because
that's why we're doing this podcast. I want to talk about movies.
yo, the Goots.
We'll take the Disney movies first and see where we go.
Yo, the Goots, this could be a lane. How far did you go in education?
I'm a college graduate, BFA in communications.
Were you a pretty good student?
I mean, yeah, but you know what though? I realized half the time it don't mean shit. Like,
And
A's don't
what
mean
college was that?
Marymount Manhattan College, which I thought was a big waste of time. It's actually right by the Strip. It's on 71st and 3rd.
Don't you think that every human being should have some sort of college education. Because with education in general, you cannot go wrong.
You can't go wrong, but unless you're to do a career like me and you, I think I should have been hitting the open mics when I was 18 years old rather than going to college. That's what I should have.
So you're actually contradicting my premise that education.
If I wanted to become a doctor or a lawyer, yeah, it's imperative. But I always want to do comedy, and I held off on that until I was 23, 24, and now I'm 38, and I just feel like if I dedicate...
No, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's perfect. You would have absolutely nothing to say. Although, have you always been a little wise or old soul?
Well, I think I am an old soul because I grew up with two old parents. So remember, my dad was in his 50s and my mom was 40 when they had me. So
got you.
They were already up there.
Got you.
Barry, let me ask you another quick question.
Yes.
So let's pretend you have a grandchild, right? Let's pretend.
Okay.
Okay. Would you show this film to your grandchild? Would you be like this? Well, I got to show this to my kid.
I would say
the kid's like 3, 4. That's what I'm saying. The age of the kid.
A 3 or 4.
Yeah. That's around the age I saw this film.
I'll tell you this.
Yeah.
First of all, before I forget, I want to thank you for letting me see this and to open my mind to animated film. This was for a first.
A home run.
This is incredible. This is truly the template of today's stuff. And matter of fact, don't take me too literally, but it has opened up my mind to maybe see something that's coming out the last 5 years. And if I want suggestions, you are definitely the man I go to. To answer your question, certainly, if I had a grandchild, I would suggest anybody listening in to see this. Is there a message from it? I honestly can't say because I was blabbing away with you.
The message is don't trust old bitches because that old bitch gave her the apple and killed her. Old bitch comes to your door and tell her, keep moving, yo ho.
And it also refutes the fact that they say apples are good for your diet too, right?
Yeah, no, apples.
Yo,
that apple killed that bitch.
Go with bananas because it has like an outer skin and shit.
Yeah,
it's somewhat impenetrable, right?
No, if
go
Snow
with
White
bananas.
Had a banana.
Go with bananas, bitches.
Yeah, I think some bitches do go for bananas. That's why they're.
Yeah.
Hey, all right, Barry Ribs. We're gonna wrap it up. I think we got some good discussion here. This is a good start. Next week we're gonna be talking about Pinocchio with Freddie Goldstein. But Barry, is there anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
When is this going to be heard? Any idea?
Oh, man. I want to get 4 in the can. Let's say September at some point. Do you have anything in October that you want to promote?
Well,
that'll be safe. October.
Let's just say this. Between October and December, right now, it's up in the air, but I think on my bucket list, December, I finally will be going to Atlanta.
All right.
I think when this is heard in October, I will have some words on a feature film that I was handpicked to be in with no audition. The title has changed, and I haven't heard from the writer yet, but we were supposed to shoot it next month, September. But I want to say, people listening in, check me out on my stand-up tours. I have a website, which I don't really mess with. Somebody made it for me. But I think look out for Barry Ribs, R-I-B-S. Look out for me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. A lot of stuff is kind of being planted now. The proverbial seeds are planted. I'm with the brand Handsome Dancer. I'm with Mo Brown. I'm with Kevin Brennan. I'm with Shuley from the Stern Show. Yo, I'm out there. Please please come to see me do stand-up all over the country. Barry Ribs, RIBS, and as I always close on any of my posts or videos. Oh yeah, look out also. I'm going to produce very soon Ribs Rants.
That's God saying, get to the point, Ribs.
Ribs Rants. Look out for Ribs Rants. We're going to produce that very soon, and that's going to be on Instagram. And thank you for your support and good health. And
they can find you on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, correct?
Yes, in some version of Barry Ribs, RIBS. And a lot of good shit is happening in the next 12 months, and I think I will be known throughout the country by at least 20 people.
Thank God. And you know what? It's probably our 20 listeners. Hey, Barry Ribs, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. Get home safe, and
Great,
thanks again.
And a great studio here.
Thank you, brother. Bye-bye.